What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 749. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas, fresh off of another Winston kill there, Luis.
Yeah, we've been doing some Winston drafts. It's been fun.
We talked about those on the show. We might have to revisit, given that you've been doing a few more of them lately as well. And it's really the best way to play one-on-one Magic, which, you know, does happen sometimes that you don't get enough for a draft, or you just have a friend coming over, or in Luis's case, a mortal enemy sitting across from you, and you want to try to beat him. But
yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, when Paul Cheon and I used to live together, we did so many Winston drafts with my cube. This is a long time ago, too. We were early adopters of the cube life, and we did a lot of 1v1 Winstons because, I mean, he wasn't going to school. I wasn't going to class. So, like, what else were we going to do? And
I thought we agreed not to.
He did end up ahead, though.
I thought we agreed not to promote Paul anymore until he started paying us, because he never actually got us for the last episode.
It's true. He kept saying that the check was in the mail, but he was too busy drafting to actually send it.
Stop mentioning him until that guy pays up. Unbelievable. Speaking of paying up, people who actually do support us, patreon.com/limited resources is a place to go to support us directly. Thanks to each and every one of you who supports us on Patreon. It means a lot. You get a thank you card and a sticker in the mail if you sign up, and you get access to all types of things like our Patreon feed, which is where you can watch the show being live recorded, which we're streaming right now. At certain tiers, you also get access to the uncut version of the show, which is like the beginning where we are talking about nonsense, and then the end of the show where we talk about nonsense, and you get access to all that stuff as well. Again, it's patreon.com/limited resources. We're also supported by Ultimate Guard. Thank you so much, Ultimate Guard, for sponsoring the podcast. They have the best stuff. That's why we reached out to them when we were looking for a sponsor, not the other way around. We were actually like, hey, we want to work with you. Can we work something out? Because we love their products. If you've ever held anything from Ultimate Guard in your hands, you can recognize the quality right away. It's head and shoulders the best stuff on the market, and we highly recommend that you check them out. You can go to ultimateguard.com to see their list of their lineup of products, and then you can go to your local game store or your favorite online retailer to pick something up. Thank you, Ultimate Guard. We do appreciate it. We also have a special guest this week, and hopefully he pays this time. It's Paul Cheon. Paul, welcome back to Limited Resources. You're digging yourself deeper, you know?
Am I the one digging, or are you the ones helping dig this, whatever this is? But it's good to be back.
Yes. No, of course, Paul, he's going to be our guest for the show, because Paul, as we had him on last time, and, you know, we mentioned before, he started a YouTube channel and he's doing draft. He kind of found his sea legs when he started doing a road to rank #1 on the arena ladder for the current set. And you've really stuck with that since then, huh, Paul?
Yeah, the road has been long, though. I don't think he's gotten there. Really windy, too.
Wow. It hasn't even been that windy, Luis. I've actually just done well. But
so you got #1.
No, ranked 1 has eluded me. There is one person, his name is Eakin, and every single month
he plays, eking those wins out.
It's just sheer volume. He plays basically. I do this every day, and I draft like 3 or 4 times a day, and he has over double my number of match wins.
So
I've already conceded that I probably won't be rank 1, but I will do my best. I finished the season. I got to rank 2 a few times. I hit the top 10, but it's just like you see all these content creators, and they're all kind of in the 300 match wins area, and he's at 656.
That's incredible.
So it's just like you just cannot get to that level. But it's been a really fun ride, and moving over to just doing kind of modern set limited stuff has really been good for me.
Yeah, it's been really great to see your channel take off. We'll talk more about that in a minute. What I want to do is actually, well, first I've got a Patreon question of the week, and then we're going to do a couple of crack-a-packs, and we'll do those really to be conversation starters with Paul, because he's drafting so much and doing very, very well in the format as well. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And we want to get his take. As somebody who's very much in the trenches day to day, we want to know kind of what your take on the format is, especially at the higher levels of Arena Ladder. Before we do, though, we have our Patreon question of the week comes from Andrew, who says, I was playing Constructed on Arena and was paired against someone named Marshall Sutcliffe. Was that your constructed plane alter ego, Marshall? And also, we have to mention the sidekick to Marshall Butcliffe, which is LSV Sucks, which is another account that exists out there. And Luis, I had to bring this up because you actually got to play against LSV Sucks once, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I played against and defeated LSV Sucks on stream. It was because they made a horrendous mistake. It was really good.
I have never had the pleasure of playing against my crappy alter ego, but I have always wanted to. But apparently they're playing constructed, so that's why. And Andrew, you should be ashamed. How dare you? It is a little weird. Like, Paul, do you have anybody that has a disparaging account name about you somewhere?
Not necessarily my name specifically, but somebody did make an account named Kyle Cheon.
What?
Which is just my son. So
that's way worse.
There's a Kyle Cheon on the arena ladder. Kyle does not play as Kyle Cheon. So if you run into Kyle Cheon, it is not my 10-year-old son who has been playing a lot more arena these days. He's been grinding the standard ladder, and he's been asking me. He's like, "Look, Dad, I really want to make a video with you." And I was like, "Hit diamond and then talk to me."
Oh so boy, okay. Wait a minute, but you said he's not playing under Kyle Cheon. He's not playing under Marshall Butcliffe or LSV Sucks, is he?
I mean, I can't disclose what actual account he plays
on. Maybe Paul made
so.
those accounts, Luis, and now he's handing them down to the children.
Yeah, that sounds plausible to me.
I know. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Everybody
right.
knows me to be the troll of this group. So.
Yeah. Yeah. For people that listen to the pre-show, they'll back that up. Okay, let's do a couple of crack-a-packs here, and Paul, I'll read out the cards, but I'm going to kind of let you give us your thoughts on where you're at in the format and what you think of each of these cards. So our first card out is a foil. It's Sterling Keykeeper. That's the tapper.
Yep. I mean, this is a card that I'm reasonably happy just to have as a curve filler type card in my decks. Obviously, you get a little more percentage points if you have things that care about committing crimes, right? So let's say you're playing a deck with a Raven of Fell Omens or Blood Hustlers card like that. It gets better, but definitely not a card I'm happy first picking, but it's a fine card.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see what the cost is when you get to tap a creature. There were cards back in the day where it was 0, then it was 1, 2 is pretty common now, but the difference between each of those is huge. It's a massive difference.
Yeah. One thing that I'll note that there are less, unlike Murders at Karlov Manor Draft, there's not as much to do with your mana in this format, right? Because you don't have a bunch of disguise cards that you can sink all your mana into and play all these big things. So you do get to tap things more often in this format just because you just have access to the mana in the late game. Sure.
Yeah. And like you said, if it's 2 tap, commit a crime, and that matters to you, then, this does fit that bill. Next is Stop Cold, your favorite, the 3 and a blue flash enchantment.
I will never, everybody listen, I will never first pick a blue common out of any pack in Outlaws of Thunder Junction. So this is also one of the worst blue commons, so just not something that I'm interested in. It's something that you could still play, like if you absolutely need removal, right? Because it's so important in this format to be able to deal with the numerous bombs that exist in this set. So if you don't have a way to kill a big thing, you can play it, but the difference between this and something like a Mystical Tether is just so huge because the body is still in play. The removal of the text is important, but the fact that they can still sacrifice the creature or bounce the creature or still use a fight spell on the creature to kill your thing just makes it so much worse than all the other removal spells.
Yeah, and as you said, it's in the worst color. I mean, I wonder how this card would play if it was in a good color. Where like the cards tend to kind of lift themselves up against each other. Because the text on this card is pretty decent. The rate's not particularly good, but I mean, they gave you the things that you want. Like it does tap it keeps it tapped, it has flash, and it even gives you the bonus of taking away the text, which can randomly be kind of good. But instead, this thing's just kind of in the basement. Next is Bristlepack Sentry. That's the 1 and a green 3/3 with Defender that can lose it.
Yeah. I mean, this is another kind of like the Keykeeper. It's just kind of a nice curve filler to have in your deck. If I'm a green-based deck, I'm just almost always going to play this card unless my 2-drops are absolutely insane. Just because if you're going to be playing green, there's 3 commons at green that's just a 4/4 or bigger, right? You have the Beaver, the Cactarantula, and the Spinewoods Paladin. So just when you draft the green deck, you're just going to have enough ways to attack with this. And this just battles with most of the creatures in the format pretty well outside of the trained airing. So it's a fine card, but again, something that I'm not happy first picking.
It also, when you throw from the saddle or something, it just randomly gets to attack. Like this one attacks more than almost any of this card type. Yeah. Because we've seen this card in like 3 or 4 sets, right? That like 2 mana, 3/3 that can attack.
It's usually blue.
Yeah, I mean it's been green before, but yeah, it's something like that. And if you meet the conditions, it'll attack. But this one like always attacks, or at least very frequently does.
Yeah, and like Paul said, it blocks well enough. In the meantime, we have another Sterling Keykeeper. So repeat on that. We've got Overzealous Muscle next. That's the 4 and a black. I can't with
the double commons in the same pack. I don't know.
I don't get it.
I agree with you.
Not for me.
They're trying to make it realistic, I guess, right? Because you can technically do that in a real pack.
Yeah.
But it just feels so off when it's just
But why did you just not do that in the real packs too?
Right.
I don't know. I don't work there anymore, Luis. So can't tell you.
I was just expecting you to know. It's a little disappointing you didn't, to be honest.
It's obviously your decision before you left, Paul. Paul was basically my boss before he left. He was my contact at Wizards for coverage stuff. He was not designing cards, as it turned out.
Wait, hold on. Let's go down this rabbit hole a second. So Paul was basically your boss when he was at WotC. And you're basically my boss when it comes to the podcast. And then when Paul worked at Channel Fireball, I was kind of his boss.
Well, but I also did stuff for CFB, so then you were my boss there.
Yeah, this
just like a cycle of us being bosses of each other.
Yeah. It's just like who comes out on top, you know? So what about Overzealous Muscle, Paul? This guy's been pretty mediocre, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I just thought we were going to the next card. This is a card that's just look, if you need something at the top end of your curve just because you were so busy taking a bunch of cheap things, I mean, and you can commit some crimes, it's fine. But this is a card that will not make the cut in like 80% of my decks. So it's just not that impressive. I like the fact that they made that indestructible clause only on your turn because it would just be such a nightmare to play against otherwise. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that was a good thing, but it's just not that great of a creature on rate. There's just so much more you can get in that 5 mana slot. So I'm just not the biggest fan. Like I said, it's a curve filler. Like you need a 5-drop, you need something big, you can play it, but it's not going to make most of my decks.
Now you said that you won't first pick a blue card. Is red the same? Because our next card is Thunder Salvo, a blue common, excuse me. Our next card is Thunder Salvo.
I don't see a world where I would actually take a red common first pick either. The best red common is, depending on who you ask, it's going to be between Explosive Derailment and Prickly Pear. And even kind of between those two, it's just like, I mean, we'll go into this later too, but I just skew so heavily into kind of what I believe are the 3 best colors, which are green, black, and white. And those colors are just not only better, like the best commons are much better, they're also way deeper. So, for example, an example of this would be like Patient Naturalist. That's probably like the 4th best green common or something, right? You look at that card, you're like, yeah, it gives you some value. I'm just going to take that over any blue or red common, just because I know that that color is just much deeper, right? Or I mean, Vault Plunderer, that's like the 3rd best black common, maybe 2nd. I'm still taking that over it. So it's just hard for me to imagine ever taking a blue or red common first pick because the best blue or red common is worse than the 3rd or 4th best green or black common.
Like, would you take Bristlepack Sentry over Thunder Salvo here, for example?
So Thunder Salvo, I have kind of in number 3, number 4. So it's not even the best. So if the Thunder Salvo was like a derailment, then I would maybe take the derailment over the Bristlepack Sentry. But given the Salvo, like the Salvo is fine. I guess it's at its best in blue-red because you can play multiple spells. But then that's putting me to a color combination I don't really want to be in anyways.
Right.
So I just wouldn't take the Salvo here.
Okay, our last common is Loan Shark.
I mean, Loan Shark is a fine value creature. It's one of the best blue commons. It's kind of, that's like you're never unhappy having Loan Shark in your deck, right?
But I've heard from content creators that some people respect that they would never first pick a blue common.
Right.
Well, no, I'm not saying that I would take it here. I am just saying it's a good blue common, right? But
I love Loan Shark. I just wish blue was good because I love casting that card. It's really sweet. The games where you go like, plot your Loan Shark, first plot Visage Bandit, then plot Loan Shark, and then just play a spell, then play both those. And it's just like, yeah. But the reality is you shouldn't be doing too much of that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, it really says a lot about blue, right? Because I mean, if you had never played this set and I showed you Loan Shark, you'd be like, wow, like that's a good card.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the thing. I think a lot of the plot cards are just generally underperforming unless you're getting like a lot in terms of just the rate on the creature. Like the plot card that I really love is just the Spinewoods Paladin, right? You're paying 4 mana and you're just getting this gigantic body that rumbles through everything. That could also be a reason why the Loan Shark just isn't also performing that well, just because when you're trying to go pound for pound against the various green decks, it just the 3/4 is just not where you want to be. When you're fighting beavers and paladins and cactarantulas, it just a lot of the times it just sits there, right? Yeah. Whereas maybe it would be better as a 4/3 because then you could at least trade with those creatures. But as a 3/4, you're going to need like a mercenary in play or whatever to give it +1/+0 or something like that to even attack through that. But I think it's a fine card, but something, again, like I said before, I'm never first picking a Loan Shark. I'll take it 6th pick when blue's clearly very open after getting a 5th pick Slickshot Lockpicker or something like that.
So that's it for the commons. Where would you be right now? Right now, you've got a Sterling Keykeeper, Bristlepack Sentry, 2 blue cards, a red card, and an Overzealous Muscle. It's a very rough pack for commons.
Yeah, I mean, this is just one of the worst collection of commons I've ever seen.
It's really bad.
I don't even like. There's not like.
It's almost irrelevant because there's no collection of rares plus uncommons that wouldn't have a better card.
Okay, so let's check those out then. So what is going to knock off whatever the best common would have been here? First, we've got our card from the breaking news sheet, which is Hindering Light. That's the blue-white counterspell that counters the thing that targets something that you control, and you get to draw a card.
Yeah,
not so much.
I'm not taking this card either. I think this card has something like a 40% win rate or something like that if you put it in your deck. Obviously, there are instances where you can blow out your opponents, but it's pretty conditional. Oh, so it's also in worse colors.
For your draft, do you just go down the 17 lands list and that's how you pick your cards? Or
no, I mean, I just know all the percentages at this point. I've just drafted a lot, and I definitely use it as a resource. I think it would be a mistake not to, but I don't go with all the numbers on there just because there are cards that are outliers. For example, Combat Tricks just tend to do better in general. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily put kind of high value on those cards depending on the archetype that I go.
Paul's a chalk drafter. I don't know if you knew that, Luis, but
what is that?
Just straight
like
down
a baseball
the line.
term, I assume.
Yeah, it's betting term. It's just straight down the line.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Next is Outlaw Stitcher. That's the 3 and a blue 1/4.
What a strong card. All these strong cards that don't really materialize.
I mean, this is a really good card. Like we probably gave this a B.
This one, at least you can play in the 5-color deck fairly effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah. Outlaw Stitcher, when I first read this card, I thought this card was just going to be one of the best uncommons in the set, too. Right? Just anytime you have a creature that makes a body, it's always going to be good. But I think they just costed this just perfectly where it's just not busted. Like, it's a good card, but plotting this on turn 5, it's like 5 mana is just a real big cost. If they change it to maybe a plot cost of 4, maybe it can actually do something. But I think part of the trap with this card is a lot of people probably try to get a little too much value than they should. And more often than not, they should probably just play this on turn 4, just to be able to kind of stabilize the board. But a lot of people just get greedy and just wait to plot turn 5, don't add to the board and die. I mean, I probably would. That is the card I would take so far, just because the commons were all terrible. But I'm hoping there's something better here, Marshall.
You said you liked the lasso. How about a Thunder Lasso?
I knew that was coming.
The other lasso, baby.
Thunder Lasso, I am not the biggest fan of. Yeah. Lassoed by the Law is like the second best uncommon in the set, but Thunder Lasso.
Wait, what's the 17 lands win rate on Lassoed by the Law?
Hold on. I don't 61.5. I don't know how close.
Are you going to confirm this, Luis?
Oh yeah, of course I am. What do you think I was going to do?
I thought you were going to do that.
You said 61.5?
He did.
No, you're very far off. It's just 61.
Oh my God.
He's within 0.5%.
Damn. All right.
Oh, you're losing it, Paul. You're losing your touch.
I'm losing my touch. I mean, it is what it is. But Thunder Lasso, I mean, I think it can be fine. I just found that aggressive decks in general just haven't been all that successful rather in this format. Like you would be looking at this in kind of a red-white deck where you're just trying to beat people down. The thing with the green-white decks is you're often just wanting to play a bunch of creatures to saddle up your creatures instead of taking the time off to play something like this. I think in a really aggressive deck, you could find a home for this, but it's not something that I'm looking to take too highly.
Okay, how about Shoot the Sheriff? Can I interest you in a Shoot the Sheriff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. Now there are matchups where this sits in your hand and you're like, what the heck? I don't have any targets, right?
Yeah.
Specifically the black-red deck. Like when you play against a black-red deck, you're just like, oh my gosh, this is just rotting in my hand. But it is insane against the green decks, particularly the green-white decks. None of the mounts are outlaws. So the fact that you have just such a good, efficient removal spell that's splashable. I mean,
so good against green-white. You just know it's always going to hit.
It's going to kill that every time. Yeah, exactly. So
and it hits 5 mana stuff. Yeah, it's really good.
And it's not blue or red. So there we go.
Hey!
We got a card. Yay!
Next is Resilient Roadrunner, which I'm assuming is not going to be high on your list.
Yeah, I mean this is fine if you're just some kind of red aggro deck, right? It's a 2/2 haste body, but it's not on the same level as Shoot the Sheriff. No,
but it has protection from coyotes, Paul. Like.
It did. Oh, you know what's really funny? In one of my drafts, I attacked and no, was it my opponent had a Bristlepack Sentry in play, and I was looking at the art and I was like, oh wait. Is this a coyote?
But it's a wolf, right?
Nuts.
Yeah,
it's a wolf or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's a fine card if you're drafting like an aggro deck, which I almost never do. But in your red-white or red-black aggro deck, it's fine.
Okay, so I let me know if this is our last card. It's our wow. Wait a minute, we did it. We got a 1 rare pack. 1 rare. We always get like 3.
Hooray!
And I want to know if this one tempts you. It is Satoru the Infiltrator. That's the blue-black 2/3 menace. It's a legend. And whenever it and or another one or more non-token creatures ETB under your control, if none of them were cast or no mana was spent to cast them, you draw a card.
Yeah, so this card is pretty cool, and I was hoping that it would just be awesome. It's great, obviously, with plot spells or if you have like a Lively Dirge, if you reanimate some stuff, it can be pretty nice. As a value card, it's good stats. But I generally just don't want to start the draft with a gold card. If this was like a black-green rare, right, then that would maybe potentially swing it for me. But I just think it's going to be just worse most of the time than Shoot the Sheriff. So I think it's tempting. It's cool. Day 1 of the format, I'm certainly taking the Satoru just because it's cool and I want to see how it plays out. Yeah. I played with it. It's solid. But I would just rather have Shoot the Sheriff here.
Take the Satoru, Wheel of the Lone Shark, go off.
There you go. Blue's open. Blue's always open.
It's always open.
It's coming back.
It's wheeling, yeah.
So we found a little island of acceptability for Paul there with Shoot the Sheriff. That pack was rough. Yeah. Let's do another one. Our first card out this time is Explosive Derailment. But you said that you're not. You would much prefer not to pick that first here, right?
I would be super disappointed if I had to first pick an Explosive Derailment. Even like I recognize that Derailment is a good card. Like if red was a top 2 or 3 color in the set, I mean, I'd be happy with it. It's just it doesn't necessarily kill all the big creatures that you want, and it's just in kind of probably the 4th best color. So that's why I wouldn't take it. But you know, it's a good card. I just don't want to start my draft necessarily in red.
These next 2 cards we can kind of go right by, but it is interesting to note they're both 1-drops and they both stink. And that's really refreshing. I think it's been part of the reason why this format's played out a little more. It has a little bit of a better feel to it than some of the prior ones, even though I think it's ballpark as fast, like it's in the same realm as being as fast as the prior ones. And that's Harrier Strix and Nezumi Linkbreaker. The fact that I'm, looking at these and being like, is really refreshing. I'm like, that's nice. Cause before, for the last year or so, it's felt like when we read the common 1-drops, I'm almost like doing backflips, just trying to convince myself that it is actually really good because they always end up being really good, or at least they have recently. But these ones haven't really done anything.
Yeah, I mean, both cards just have a ton of text on them. So you're like, okay, this, I mean, a 1 mana that can do a lot of these things can be really cool. Harrier Strix, I basically almost never play. It's pretty rare that I play it. I can see maybe if you have like a blue-red tempo deck with a bunch of Razzle Dazzlers or something, you try to cheese them out that way.
Yeah.
But with the Link Breaker, I do think there is a deck that there is a home for this, and that's the black-white deck. If you have a bunch of Ruthless Lawbringers and a Baron Bertram or something like that, that's where this card actually does some work there, because you really want this creature to die just so you have that mercenary in play, because then all of a sudden you have this mercenary that can pump up your outlaw medics. So I think in black-white, it's certainly a card that's decent, especially if you have some sacrifice stuff. But I am never taking this early. If I'm firmly in black-white, then yeah, I can maybe take it in the middle of a pack.
Trained Arinx is next. That card's the one that people put respect on its name for being a good aggressive card in the format.
I mean, this is the best aggressive common creature in the format, right? It's just 2 mana, 3/1. It's basically unblockable. If they play this on the play, I mean, it's just every time. If your opponent goes turn 2, Trained Arinx on the play, and you don't have a removal, so you're like, oh, right? You're like,
I'm taking 6 minimum. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I'm going to take 3 the next turn. They're going to scry. It's just like, it just kind of does everything that you want. And then there's all the mount synergies on top of that with throw from the saddle, right? Even if they just go turn to Arinx and to throw from the saddle, put a counter on this thing. I mean, this is just, yeah, this card is just phenomenal. I mean, it's actually kind of close. I mean, between this and Tether, which one is the best white common? And there have been plenty of instances where I've taken this over to Tether when I just absolutely need a 2-drop in my deck, right? It's just like, I'm green-white mounts. I have enough removal. Like, I will take this. I think early on, I'd still probably lean Tether, but I mean, I wouldn't have thought that when I first kind of went over all the cards in the beginning of the format.
Quilled Charger, kind of boring. That's the 3 in a red, 4/3, blah, blah, blah. What about
much worse?
Yeah. What about Dance of the Tumbleweeds? That's our last common.
Oh, Dance of the Tumbleweeds is a card that's gone up in my rankings. Going in, I thought this was, hey, this is just something you play in like your mana ramp decks, maybe your 3 or 4 color desert decks, because it gives you the fixing. I mean, turns out the card's just great. Like, I'm just basically never cutting this in almost any of my decks. Just the flexibility of being able to pay 6 mana to get a creature and another desert is just huge. And so oftentimes I can play this on turn 3, but I just wait. And I'm just like, if I can just do anything else, I will, so that I can just get a 7/7 in play and find my desert. And not only that, there's just some deserts that provide utility in this format too, right? Like you can search for conduit pylons, get a surveil. You can search for a bucolic ranch. There's just, it has more flexibility than you think, and I really like it, but I'm not taking it over the Trained Arinx.
Yeah. Uncommons, we have another Thunder Lasso, so we heard how you feel about that. The breaking news sheet, this is a little bit of a casualty of the format, perhaps. It's Hypothesizzle, which is a really cool, interesting, fun card that's pretty powerful, and unfortunately is in basically the worst color pair, so it doesn't really get much shine.
Yeah, it's a good card. I mean, if you end up in blue-red, you're happy to have this. Hopefully maybe get a Geyser Drake and then you can like play it for 4 mana or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a fine card. I've seen a lot of people play it. Also, a popular archetype is just kind of like a Grixis control deck. You just try to get a bunch of deserts and bandits halls and play all the removal that you see. And that's where this fits in. But just based on the nature of the format, even something like this, I would just not first pick over, especially something like a Trained Arinx.
Yeah. Where have you been on full steam ahead, the kind of overrun, the 3 green +2/+2 trample, and they can only be blocked by 1 creature?
So
Sorcery.
I started out super low on this.
Yeah.
I was just like, 5 mana +2/+2. That's a big difference, right? The overrun we're used to is +3/+3, and that's just a world of difference. But I did have an aggressive deck where I was just like, I just need a 23rd card. Let's just try this card and just see what happens. And it turns out the can't be blocked by more than 1 creature clause is extremely, extremely good, and actually makes this better than you would expect. It's not something that I take highly still. You're still just going to get this 8th pick or whatever. But in the right deck, I mean, especially if you have ways to make some tokens or whatever, I don't mind this as kind of a nice way to kind of finish out games, particularly because that last line of only blocked by 1 thing is pretty relevant. But again, it's not something that I take highly, and certainly something I don't take over the Trained Arinx.
Yeah, these type of cards always have kind of a target on their back. because they are only offensive. Like they do literally nothing to affect the board if you're significantly behind in a game. And they also require decent setup cost, with not only your build requiring you to, have critical mass of creatures to make sure that full steam ahead's worth it, and also cutting down on any cards that aren't creatures or aren't things that support this game plan. But then also they need to be alive. Like you need to have a board state that needs to be big enough. And I mean, I've actually had this card in my deck a couple of times where it was close, but as you said, the +3/+3 versus +2/+2 is definitely a massive difference because look, if you play full steam ahead and you can present a lethal attack, then you can usually turn it into like a piece of removal plus a whole bunch of damage coming through. And then in the times when there's a built out board, it just wins you the game on the spot. So those are two pretty decent spots to be in. But like if you're all in attack with full steam ahead is like one short of lethal, it completely changes everything. Like your opponent can say, okay, fine, I'll just take it all. And now your shields are completely down and you may just die on the crackback, or they can strategically block one thing, that they actually have a decent block on or whatever, and just take the rest. And yeah, I mean, it feels good to get in for 12 or 15 off of one card, but like if it doesn't win you the game, the board state is not improving, and you've opened yourself up to like a pretty gnarly crackback. I've been mediocre on it. I mean, I like the fact that it's a little easier to cast, than Overrun, but
right.
What about Scorching Shot, the red deal 5?
I mean, it's a fine removal spell. Red is actually kind of a big deal. Like you're not playing this. It's nice. You have to kind of think of this as something that you play like turn 5, and like maybe you can take advantage of the fact that it costs 2 mana, because by turn 5 maybe you'll have the double red and then you can double spell, right? That's kind of what you want to be looking here. So it's a solid removal spell, but one, the fact that it's red, and two, I mean, it's kind of hard to cast. Like I still think I would take the trained Airings here over the Scorching Shot, because it's just the one of the best common creatures in the set and in one of the colors that I want to be.
Prosperity Tycoon is next. That's the 3 and a white 4/2.
Okay. All right. So we might have a contender now.
Okay. This card's good.
Yeah, no, this card is really, really solid. I mean, you're getting just a lot of value just in terms of you get a 4/2 and a 1/1. This creature is really, really hard to block. And it's not just like any 1/1 token, right? You're getting a mercenary, which does allow you, especially if you're aggressively slanted, to kind of change the board and attack, like have your 2/2 upgrade into a 3/3, 3/2, and then have it trade with something bigger that they have. So I do like this card. I've had this pick a lot of times, and I feel like I've gone both ways. So I do think it's extremely close. Might take the Tycoon.
Okay.
Might take the Tycoon.
Okay. Well, you got a couple more cards here. There's a Wrestler Rampage. That's the white instant that untaps all the creatures target player controls, or target creature gains double strike until end of turn, or you can do both.
I don't think I've ever played this spell in any of my decks.
Okay, that's probably not a good sign.
I'm happy to keep it that way. I think it's just like a D-level combat trick, so I'm just not going to put it in my deck.
Okay, and then the last card is Magda the Horde Master. Ooh. That's the one that gets you a tap treasure whenever you commit a crime.
Makes dragons when you sack some treasures and all that.
Yeah, and the cool part is that, OG Magda, my brain kind of thinks to, okay, I can turn treasures to something cool from my library, but this one they just appear, this dragon. You don't need to support it in any other way than playing Magda and having a way to commit some crimes or make some treasures.
Yeah, I mean, she's really, really fun to play with.
Yeah.
I have yet to see anybody actually make a dragon with this. So it's just like it's a must kill, right? You've made a dragon? Well,
I have.
That's awesome. So I can't speak to how awesome it's been for me just because it's always died. I mean, it's certainly very powerful. It starts you out in red, but definitely one of the cards that would make you want to first pick this. I think first pick, first pack. I think taking the Magda is could be fine, just because you can kind of try to draft around it as well, right? It's like, all right, well, let's just try to make sure I draft a deck with more interaction. Maybe we can take deserts a little bit higher just to commit more crimes. And even cards like Mind Raider get better, right? Because you play this turn 2, play a Mind Raider turn 3. All of a sudden, you're just ramping into playing an extra dragon. So I think I would take it here. I don't even know if it's correct, but I just think it's the far more fun option.
Yeah. What do you like,
I think it's
Luis?
close enough.
You like Prosperity Tycoon, your invitational card, or maybe Magda?
I would take the Magda. I don't know what it's correct, but I like taking the 2-drop, and I think that even in like I draft the multicolored desert deck a fair amount, and playing Magda on 3 and then playing a desert immediately on turn 3 like is a pretty strong sequence. It's a card that I think is fine to splash. Obviously, it's better if base red is one of your base colors, but it's a powerful card. The downside of first picking a red card is pretty big, but it doesn't. I don't think that means I wouldn't take it. So.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely like taking Magda. It makes me nervous, like, because the road that you start to go down by taking a red card definitely makes me like very conscious of what my second color is going to be, or if I'm splashing this Magda, or, if it's going to be, a few red removal spells in a Magda and then like a bunch of green cards or whatever. But I mean, the card's very powerful. And like I said, I actually did make a dragon with it, and it's gross. Like, it's like, wow, that's really powerful. And you don't need that much. Like you said, Paul, if you can support it a little bit, you can really turbo one of those things out too. Like, it happens pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think the issue with Magda is that it's good in specific decks, right? For example, Magda is probably not that great in like a red-white deck that's just looking to attack, and you want like 15 or 16 creatures with some combat tricks. Like, how many ways are you actually going to be able to commit crimes? So I think it really kind of skews you towards perhaps a blue-red, maybe even a black-red deck that just is able to commit a lot of crimes. That's the thing. I think the one thing with this format is kind of the trying your best to commit as many crimes as possible and get the payoffs just really hasn't been the most successful strategy. And this kind of leans into that. So if you try to build your deck where you're just trying to commit a bunch of crimes, that might not necessarily be the recipe for success. And that's kind of how I've had some drafts fall apart, where that's my only hesitancy to going into something like a Magda, where I'm just like, okay, I'm first picking this because this is a powerful red rare, and I'm going to try to draft around it. The problem is all the cards I've drafted around it and had me end up with just a worse deck than I would have drafted if I just drafted like a white-black deck or whatever, right? Because the cards surrounding the Magna just end up being a little bit worse.
Okay. Okay, well, let's switch gears here and start picking Paul's brain about the format and about, what's been going on with him. So I'll start big picture for you, Paul. How's YouTube been going?
It's been going great. We had kind of the first month was a little bit rough, where I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to be doing. Go ahead.
Classic Paul, just one of those content creators who thinks he just turns on his YouTube channel and just like the money, the subs, it all just rolls in.
That is definitely not how I started.
Because that was my experience. So
that actually was.
It was. What's funny is, when I was asking the two of you, I'm like, what do I need to do? Right. And I asked Luis, like, how did you know that this was going to do well? Or like, was there a moment when things just clicked and like, it just started going off? And he's like, what are you talking about? I just knew it was going to do well. And it did. And I'm like, okay, well, thanks, Luis. Nobody else is like you and has that ability.
It's true.
So Marshall's the one with the actual YouTube channel here, but jokes aside, you did it the right way, which is you tried a few different things and you figured out what stick. You did start with Vintage Cube, and then when you really launched the road to rank 1 is like kind of when it felt like it kind of clicked.
Yeah, no, it definitely did, and I think there was a really big moment because when I first switched, it was it was doing okay, but I think there was the Arena Open, which happened maybe a month down the line, and I won. I won $2,000, and that was awesome. And that like kind of kickstarted the channel. Everybody, I don't know what the deal is with the algorithm, but just way more people watch that. People just love watching Magic with stakes on it. And so when I won that, I think it just started really growing, and it's been continuing to grow. And so I'm glad because when I first started, I wasn't sure. I was like, I'm going to give this a few months. And if it doesn't do well, then I'm going to have to be an adult and try to find a real job. But there has been enough of an upswing here where things are growing. There's just a lot of people have really been enjoying the content where I feel like there is a future in this, and I'm going to continue doing my best here.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. And I'll make sure to put a link in the show notes too for anybody that wants to watch it. And, I would describe Paul's approach to his videos as instructional. Like, it has a strong instructional tone to it where he really does a great job of explaining why he's making the picks that he's making and why he's making the plays that he's making. So if you're, looking to improve and also be entertained, like, you get kind of both of those things with Paul's channel, which I mean, that's, I think, why it's been taking off for you. So congrats on that, and keep up the good work. And by the way, that's daily drafts over there too. So Paul's on that grind, no doubt about it.
Oh yeah.
What's been your general strategy for drafting this format?
So I guess I'll give you kind of the short timeline. I think when I first started, I think I tried to draft everything, right? Figured out what worked and what didn't. And then ultimately I just kind of landed on, all right, it's very clear that green is the best color. Mm-hmm. And pairing that with black or white is kind of where you want to be. But green, anything is good just because green is so extremely deep. So in the beginning, I just wanted to go green X. And then eventually I was like, no, I want to go green, black, white. And I draft, and that was kind of that was the secret sauce. If I just had a green, black, white deck, I ended up, I over 8 drafts, I had a 90% win rate drafting Abzan, which was just ridiculous. Like
90?
It was like a good sample size, right? It was just some absurd number. I'm like, yep, wow. That's another. I think it took me like 8 drafts before I didn't trophy with an Abzan deck.
That's incredible.
And the way that most of those decks ended up was a green black shell, right? With removal and trying to do some of the graveyard things. And then oftentimes I would be splashing white for the uncommons. So either Buried in the Garden, Lassoed by the Law, or Shepherd of the Clouds were the most common things that I splashed for. Mm-hmm. And then every now and then, if my mana fixing is good, I'll obviously also take Mystical Tether, just because this format's all about making sure you have enough removal, right? Mm-hmm. Removal in the previous set, as we know, was pretty bad, right? You didn't want to be using your removal to kill disguise creatures because you're often trading up on mana. But in this format, it's a touch slower. There aren't disguise creatures, and there's so many bombs that must be killed that I just feel like I prioritize removal over everything. And that's kind of what I did early on. And it really, really paid off. I kind of just drafted the way old school drafters draft, where it's like, oh, that's a 2-for-1 or that's a removal spell. I'll take it, right? Yeah. I don't care if Consuming Ashes costs 4. It kills whatever I need. And that just proved to be very successful for me. So, and that's just kind of what I did. I was like, every deck, I just want to make sure I have 5 or 6 hard pieces of removal, maybe a combat trick, maybe a recursion spell, and then have the rest of my deck be creatures. And that was just kind of the recipe that I used to really just do much better in this format than I did in the last one. I mean, I had in the first season, I had my win rate was at 75% with an over 50% trophy rate. It was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of slowed down. I've been kind of running bad. So now I'm at like 70.6 or something, but
running bad.
Yeah. Running bad. Yeah. But I mean, that is something we should mention too, is that, we've seen that people have been posting on various subreddits and stuff, because on 17 lands, you can see, people's win rates, and they realized something that we've known for a very long time, which is that you are an excellent world-class Magic player, right? And you make it look easy in the booth, and, when you're streaming and stuff like that, because you're able to talk about it while you're doing it and all that. But I mean, you're legitimately one of the best OTJ drafters going right now, and the numbers back that up as well. I
had a quick question. Who would your guys' guess be is the best OTJ drafter?
Odyssey Torment Judgment?
No, best at both. Odyssey Torment Judgment and Outlaws of Thunder Junction.
I mean, I've got to be in the top 10.
Do you know how to draft the old set, Paul?
That's the set I started playing Magic
in. Oh, yeah. So you're up there.
I'd be willing to bet, Paul, that you're better than me at this set. I know that for a fact. Uh-huh. And I think I'm probably slightly better than you at OTJ, because I did a good amount of that.
You played a little more Magic before that time, whereas that's when I really started playing a lot of Magic. And then because Torment was around when I started playing Magic Online. And then with Judgment, I was playing a lot. But Luis was definitely already kind of an endgame boss on Magic Online. But I was kind of getting there. But then, yeah.
Whoa, that's your perspective? What? My perspective is that you were one of the people were afraid to play against when I started playing Magic.
Okay, well, I guess it was both of us.
Maybe we're just both great.
Yeah, maybe you're both great.
To be fair, we were. I mean,
we did live on Magic Online back then.
Yeah, I mean, every era has their like Magic Online thing, right? For I think it was like us back then. Then it was like Reed, and then it was like Nathan, right? There's just like always somebody else who's like the next Magic Online person. But we were the OGs.
Put some respect on Jabberwocky's name. Logan dominates on Magic Online and has done very well in paper too.
He plays on everything. Yeah, he's great at everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would fine. I was being humble. Maybe we'll go top 5. Maybe we'll go top 5.
Yeah, I like it. But Paul, you know, one of the many reasons we wanted to have you on this week was because of how much you've been just absolutely killing it. You're top of the 17 land standings as far as the things that we measure for who's the best at a format, which is win rate and trophy rate once you get past a reasonable sample size. So yeah, that's I feel like we should mention that as well. How many drafts are you doing a week about?
I don't know. I would say that I probably draft at least I would say, let's see, 3 to 4 times a day. So probably at least somewhere between 20 to 25 drafts a week.
Okay.
When the set first came out, it was a little more than that, of course.
The man doesn't even take weekends off.
I do not. That's actually true.
No, it's daily drafts over at the Cheon channel.
Yeah.
What's it like to be able to draft every day?
Oh my God.
You do the same thing.
You're drafting right now.
He probably
That is not true.
Yeah, he's doing a Winston draft on the other monitor.
Yeah.
Okay, that is true. But
yeah, and then when the set first came out, I was also posting like double videos a day just because I just wanted to get the reps in. So in the beginning, I probably did something like 25 to 30, and now things are slowing down. People have played a lot, so I would say probably somewhere between 20 to 25 drafts a week.
Do you think you're going to get number one? I know your series is titled Road to Rank Number One, but as we mentioned before, you fell a little short last time, and I'm assuming that the brick wall that is Eakin is still standing there.
Yeah, no, I'm going to keep it real with you, Marshall. I do not have the time anymore as an adult with a family and I'm editing these videos, right? Like if I'm just playing 7 or 8 drafts a day, which Eakin can do, because I don't think I don't think Eakin makes content. So he can just put in way more hours. And the way that the ladder works is you just kind of like quantity over quality up to a certain level, right? So if your win rate is Eakin's is 64.4%, right? If he just keeps the 64.4% but plays twice as much as me, who has an over 70% win rate, he's just going to have a higher. He's just going to be rank 1 and I won't. So I just don't think I'm going to get there. But I just felt that it's at least fun to put something so that I have a goal, even though it's you don't really get anything for hitting rank 1, so nobody really tries for it. But I just wanted to give myself a personal goal just to see how well I do. And honestly, going into this, I didn't know how close I'd get, just because I haven't really done anything remotely competitive in many, many years, right? And
yeah,
now it's just like, if I decided to play Magic every single day again, how well could I do? That was kind of the whole premise of this. And
feels like your ceiling's quite high still. It's very impressive. That win rate is ridiculous, especially 75% that you had for that stretch. Like, that's insanity. Probably you'll see a similar trend though, with when the format first comes out versus later on in the format as people start to figure it out. I mean, have you noticed the tables, your opponents, having better and better decks? What type of decks do you see at the top of the ladder?
Yeah, definitely. I'm seeing a lot more multicolored decks, just a lot of people drafting various, 3 or 4 color green decks. Or another thing that I think is very common among the top players is the Dimir Crime decks. I just think good players like to play that style of deck. They're like, I'm going to outplay my opponent with all these 2-for-1s and do whatever. So I have seen a lot of that. Like you said, I don't see blue-white or blue-red all that often. It's mostly kind of green-based decks or Dimir Crime decks. That's kind of what I run into. I have noticed that in the drafts, green has basically, I mean, the secret's out, right? The first 2 weeks, you can draft just absurd green decks. And it reminds me of, I keep going back to the last set, but in MKM, remember the first 2 weeks where everybody was on Boros, and every good player that you played on I legitimately almost decided to just stop because it was not fun. It got to that point where it was just like, people still not everybody figured out that Boros was the thing to do. So everybody had the insane Boros deck they were on to play, and they would just kill me turn 5. And it just wasn't fun. But then, of course, draft is, just corrects itself, self-correcting. That was the word. And eventually it actually ended up becoming a pretty decent set, actually. Once, you had 3 people fighting over Boros, and you can draft Simic and do all these other things. Here, it's a similar thing. People are really fighting over green. So I wouldn't advocate avoiding green, but I've definitely had to learn and adjust and find ways to win without just utilizing green cards, and my win rate has suffered as a result. But I mean, still having success. Just by drafting so much, I think I've been able to do a really good job of just being able to read my lane, and I think that's what's giving me probably a bigger edge. One thing that I notice a lot, even in my Discord, and I see people post their draft logs and stuff, is a lot of people just get married to their first couple of picks, and they just never speculate or take anything. They're like, oh, first pick Miriam, I'm all in, right? They're like, first pick Miriam, I'm green white mounts. I'm like, you could have taken that fifth pick Consuming Ashes over whatever, right? Just to see what would have happened. And if you can identify that open lane, it really, really pays off. And that's kind of how I've approached this format. And it's the one that's helped me, because if you can find the right lane and the right color combination to be in, then you get the signpost uncommons late. And the power level of the uncommons and the rares in this format are just so bonkers. You just need to make sure you're in that right pairing.
Yeah. How much do you think the power level of the rares affects the format as a whole?
It definitely makes it less fun for a lot of people. I mean, I like good rares. I just think it's fun to play with. And the way that you have to look at it is everybody has the same chance. You hear people, I've never opened a good rare in 6 drafts. I'm like,
I've
draft
heard that
more.
before.
Like,
I've heard that every week for the past about 10
I'm always
years.
unlucky. I always get manuscripts. Like, look,
I've heard all those things before, Paul. Have you ever heard those sentences?
And obviously, all of those things happens to everybody. And just kind of the way that I think, the approach that I'm using, or the thing that I'm telling those other people who go, I don't like this format because they have rares. It's like, okay, you just have to shift your mindset. You have to go, all right, with this format, going into every game, just know that there is a 10% shot you're going to lose to a rare, okay? But there's a shot you're going to have that rare and you're going to do the same thing. Once you kind of go in with that expectation, it's like, all right, they Bonnie Paul'd me. It's all good. Okay, you know what? I got Bonnie Paul'd. It's fine.
It is what it is.
You get Bonnie Paul'd. It is what it is. Then
what?
you can be... Yeah. Bonnie me. Then if you can kind of get past that, because of course everything is the same, then just enjoy the rares that you get sometimes, and you're going to lose sometimes. Like, it's not the end of the world if you lose. Like, a lot of people who listen here are people who draft a lot all the time. Like, yeah, you got turn 3 Oko. Guess what? You're going to turn 3 Oko somebody too, right? It's whatever. It happens. Once you can get over that, then I think you'll have a lot more fun. And still, like, I think that this format's pretty deep and there's a lot you can do. And so just do everything in your power to control what you can. And if you get Oko'd, you get Oko'd, right?
Do you draft differently?
Yeah. So the one thing that I talked about before is just making sure that I put a higher emphasis on removal. And I kind of found that out pretty early. Mm-hmm. Just like when you do the set reviews, you're like, holy cow, there are a ton of ridiculous bombs. Most of them are in green and most of them are creatures. So what do? Take removal higher, right? So that's just what I did, because I think kind of going in, I was like, I'm going to say Consuming Ashes is the best removal spell, but I'm ready to be super wrong, because Murder was not very good in the last one, right? Mm-hmm. And it turns out Consuming Ashes is one of the best removal spells in the format, behind Throw from the Saddle, just because green is ridiculous. And so by making that adjustment early and making sure that almost all of my decks just have 6 removal spells, like, I'm just taking all those removal spells, I'm splashing removal spells, just making sure that I hit that quota. It just means that, yeah, you played a turn 2 Bristly Bell. I killed it. All right, let's move on, right? It's just, right. I just make sure that my deck is equipped with ways to beat at least the rares that don't just, like, for example, Dust Animus. Mm-hmm. My decks will beat Dust Animus a lot of the time, because it's just a big creature, right? It's like a Baneslayer Angel. Like, my deck will have the Doomblade, right?
Right.
But if they play a Bonnie Paul, I mean, there's just nothing you can do. Right. You just lose to a Bonnie Paul.
Right. Even if you have
there's some rares that, like, removal stops, and then there's some rares that, like, you have to be kind of like, I've beaten Bonnie Paul before. If you're, like, already winning and have a good hand and they play it, you can sometimes still win. Dust Animus is, like, obviously a great card. I've somehow had multiple decks with 2 of them. Like, I just keep opening the card a lot. It's a fantastic card, I can tell you that. But it's like a super beatable card. Like, you Consuming Ashes it, but I mean, that doesn't do anything,
Yeah, exactly. Totally. So,
you were saying that early on, you gravitated to green, specifically with black and some white in there too, and that you had to adjust after, the course of time has said, okay, everybody's trying to be in green and you don't get it quite as easily. What have been some of the archetypes that you've gone to that have, given you some win rate back, even though you're not in green?
I would say that the Dimir Crime deck.
Oh, so you like that deck too? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a lot of fun to play. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Just being able to just draft, intimidation campaigns and draw a bunch of cards and use a bunch just all counter spells and removals and win with intimidation campaign, and then I don't know, kill them with an ambush gigapede or whatever. It's just like some random thing at the top end of your curve. That's been fun. I've actually trophied with 2 Cruel Ultimatum decks, and that was incredibly fun. I mean, that was amazing, and I highly recommend it. Would do it again. The thing is, this format is just, if you draft appropriately, it's you can slow down the game to the point where you can get away with casting something like this. And the combination of all the deserts and making sure you pick up a bandit. So there's Bandit's Hall, there's Oasis Gardener. There's just enough ways to make sure that you can get the mana to cast this card. The only thing is, with Cruel Ultimatum specifically, it's like basically, if you see a Grixis Desert, you have to take it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? If you want to pass.
Impossible to pass.
Yeah. You see a blue-black desert and you see like a premium removal spell, you just take the desert, because put it this way, you're going to be Grixis anyways, right? You're going to get removal. Yeah. Right? You're going to get removal. Like, you're going to get a Thunder Salvo 7th pick. You'll get the Derailment or whatever. So just
especially since you're playing the red removal spells that a lot of people are really not going to be taking.
Sure. Exactly. So you'll get the Terminal Agonies. You'll get.
Oh, I've gotten literally 15th pick Terminal Agonies multiple times. So I have a couple questions about the kind of Cruel Ultimatum deck, because, well, first of all, like, where would you take Cruel Ultimatum? Like, are you pick one, pack one-ing it over a decent common, like Consuming Ashes, Trained Airings, that sort of thing?
Okay, so it depends on the situation.
Day 2 of the Arena Open, you want to win the draft. Like, not setting the content stuff aside.
Fair enough.
Or setting the fact that you want to have fun aside, whatever. Like, obviously, it's always fun to take Cruel Ultimatum. It's a very justifiable card to take because it's a strong card. If you're drafting for fun, you can always just justify doing that. I'm asking, like, if you wanted to win and that was your only concern, would you take Cruel Ultimatum before, like, over a good common?
I would not. I just think it's just too hard to justify taking a extremely Grixis heavy card. You're just taking a 3-color card first pick and just hoping that all the stars align to get the proper mana fixing and also be in that lane. If the person to your right is just in Dimir, then you're just you just have a really high fail rate there. The power is there, but if there's something like a Cruel Ultimatum and a throw from the saddle, like, I'm just going to take the throw from the saddle. But obviously, if I'm just doing like a normal draft at home, I'm just taking Cruel Ultimatum every time just because it's the sweetest card.
So follow up, let's say, where do you like ideally take it? Like, if you, let's say it's pick 4 and you have like 2 black cards and a red card or a blue card. Like, I know you're not going to take blue and red cards very early, but let's say it's pick 3. You have a Consuming Ashes and a Desert's Due. You've taken like those 2 and you see Cruel Ultimatum. Like, would you take that over like a reasonable like green common?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I mean, it is weird because if you do see a 3rd pick, though, that could be potentially a sign that you could get those blue and red cards, right? Just because somebody also passed you those cards. But again, it depends on how good the green card is. Like, if it's a throw from the saddle, like, it would still just like, that's my bread and butter, right? Golgari Splash, right? So that's something I want to be anyways. So if there is a good green card, I'm probably going to take it. If there is. Now, the question is, if let's say there's take up the shield or something, I probably take the Cruel Ultimatum. But if there's a Trained Airings, that's also closer. Cruel Ultimatum is extremely powerful, though. I mean, if you play it, it's going to be the best card in your deck and it's going to be amazing. But it's got such a huge setup cost in terms of how you draft. It's I don't know. I could be wrong on this because every time I see a Cruel Ultimatum, I just take it in my draft videos just because I just think it leads to good content.
And you always win with it, I'm sure.
and I've been winning with it. So maybe you're just supposed to. But I feel like if you want, let's say you're day 2 of the Pro Tour or whatever, like, I feel like you should probably just lean into taking the good common that's easy to cast.
Well, it's interesting because go ahead, Paul.
But if you're like, let's say you're just firmly in blue-black or something. Let's say you have 2 black cards and a Slick Shot Lockpicker. 4th pick, I see a Cruel Ultimatum. Absolutely, I'm taking it, right? Yeah. Because now I already have something to go with it.
So we've kind of dialed in a little on like where you take it. You said you're not ever passing the deserts, but like where else is your like? What are other cards that you would typically not want that Cruel Ultimatum would make you pick up? Like, how does it change your draft differently?
Yeah, absolutely. The big cards are, if you can find ways to ramp into it, that would be great. The colorless card specifically. So Bandit's Hall and Oasis Gardener go up a little bit. I mean, Bandit's Hall is already a card that people like, especially in the blue-black crime decks. It's just a pretty solid card to play. But even Oasis Gardener, I had a deck where I just like played two of them.
Great card with Cruel Ultimatum.
Right? Yeah. It gains you the life too, right? And if it dies, then you can have something to get back. So that's something that goes up in value. And of course, also just cheap interaction. Like I prioritize that super heavily. In a Grixis deck, for example, I think it's close between Consuming Ashes and Desert Stew, which one's better in most decks. But in a Grixis deck, like Desert Stew is just going to be better almost every single time. Yeah. Just because you're going to have 4 or 5 deserts in your deck if you want your deck to actually cast Cruel Ultimatum, in which case the Desert Stew becomes a better card. So, Phantom Interference, Desert Stew, just cheap interaction is something that I'm going to highly prioritize, because all I want to do is survive to the late game, right? Desperate Bloodseeker, it's a lifelink creature, anything. I just want to survive to the late game. So I'm going to take all the cheap stuff higher because I know I already have a 7-mana card that I'm trying to build up to.
Yeah, it's interesting because, it does feel like Cruel Ultimatum is actually good. The risks that you outlined are definitely present and something that you should keep in mind. But, you said if you open it up on your stream, you're like, screw it, I'm just going to take the Cruel Ultimatum, for content value. But I'll say there's other cards in the set and on the bonus sheet too that also would make for great content that I don't think you feel as compelled to take, cards like Mindslaver or something like that are like really big, splashy, interesting, cool things to do on stream, but have not proven to be as powerful as Cruel Ultimatum is in the format. And I think that, we kind of give ourselves a little bit more of a green light if in the back of our head we know I can build around this, and if I do and it goes well, I will win. Where with Mindslaver, it's like, well, I can put some extra ramp in my deck, but like I don't necessarily win if I cast and pop off a Mindslaver. It obviously is a good bump to your win rate, but I actually have done that and lost or had it do mediocre things where that can never ever be said of a card like Cruel. Like if it goes on the stack and resolves, like,
yeah, I mean, it's one of the most powerful cards printed, right? Just in general. So
in terms of resolving, setting the cost aside.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the juice has to be worth the squeeze, obviously. And in this case, it definitely is. Cause when you cast it, you're just getting like a 8-for-1 or whatever, right? Just in terms of the life swing, the card you get back.
We can't count how high it is for one.
It's infinite. Well,
our math doesn't support that.
No.
Right. I mean, Luis understands how powerful Cruel Ultimatum is, I'm sure. So
yes, he does.
Cruel Ultimatum got Raptor and Webb, David Ochoa and Josh Sutter-Layton onto the Pro Tour. Like there was this 5-color control deck, the like Cruel Ultimatum, Cloud Thresher, Cryptic Command, Wrath of God deck with like Reflecting Pool and Vivid Lands that I was like obsessed with. And I played it a ton. I told those guys they had to play it in PTQs, and they both won PTQs and kind of chained that into a bunch of PT appearances. So
and then somehow you decided to take black-white tokens against it at the Pro Tour?
Well, we thought that was better.
Yeah. I mean, he gets second isn't bad.
Yeah.
There you go.
Bad. I mean, Marshall, my appearance in that Pro Tour, that made you a lot of good content.
That is true. That is true. We did that actually, that was the inspiration to do the whole channel that I did. Like, so yeah, you're right.
The watch channel. Nice.
Not that channel.
When's that paycheck coming in?
Not that channel. So we're talking about like Mindslaver and Cruel, and, I'll put Villainous Wealth on this list, those type of cards as well. Those are from the bonus sheet. In this case, the breaking news bonus sheet. But as we know, there are 2 bonus sheets as well, a small one and then a medium-sized one that are, I don't know. Let's just say they've generated a lot of discussion. What's your current take on bonus sheets and how they're used and the ones that we got for this particular set?
I think the fact that they had to basically shoehorn the big scorecards into the set was a net negative for the limited environment. It increases the sheer number of rares you can open, and just like increases the variance in the games. I will say the thing that it affected the most, maybe people won't feel it that often because there's no Grand Prix or anything like that, is just sealed deck. Like this might be one of the worst sealed deck formats of all time, just because you just have people opening 11 rares, and if you open like the good big scorecards, like like you're just going to have like 8 on color rares, and the rares are so powerful too on top of that. So I feel like it's kind of warped seal deck where you just don't even have a chance, and it just leads to an extremely frustrating experience. And I'm fully going to experience it all this weekend because there is going to be an arena open thing this weekend, and
arena
it's going to be arena qualifier. I believe if you do really well, it qualifies you for the arena championship, and it's day 1 sealed. And I was like, is it draft day 2? Nope. It's day 2 sealed as well. So gonna have to get lucky to do well in that one.
That's tough.
Hey, the nice part about that is that like you just open a bad sealed, you don't have to play all day. Like
True.
It at least goes quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think a lot of people enjoy that part of that. Just like, oh, I opened crap and I lost to Bonnie Paul into whatever overwhelming forces or whatever. Speaking of which, overwhelming forces, come on.
Yeah.
Like I think Cruel Ultimatum is like the perfect card to put in because it gives people a mission.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, you need to like do this crazy thing with your mana to make your mana work and then play this. And then overwhelming forces is just silly. Like you just play it and you win the game.
Yeah.
And it actually ended up being one of the best rares in the set.
Yep.
And I just really dislike that about that card. But
yeah.
Anyways.
So because we're kind of talking about 2 things that are both affecting this. One of them is the play boosters thing, and one of them are the bonus sheets and such. What about just the breaking news sheet? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
You know, honestly, I know people may have some gripes with just how the cards look or whatever, but I would just say that
just because they look like crap. Yeah, that's why.
Yeah. That's fair.
I mean,
but I have actually just at least, you know, there's a lot of cards there that are just cool that I don't mind in terms of what they added to the limited environment. Like I love that Repulse is a card.
Yeah.
Right. I like Path to Exile is cool. There's just like a lot of cards in there that I think have make the drafting experience more unique. So I do like that about that. And obviously there are some cards that are just completely absurd, and I just feel like you just need to vet those cards a little bit more. But I overall, I think those cards, because you see them pretty often, right? It's not, especially the uncommons, like
1% or 1 per pack. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. So it's just like you just see them all the time. So it's just you're kind of used to playing with just a whole bunch of new cards, which for somebody like me who drafts 20, 25 times a week, like it just makes the set more replayable.
Yeah, I love the breaking news sheet. You know, a bunch of the cards that we talked about here are on that sheet. It does exactly what you said, Paul, where it gives you these kind of goals. And yeah, some of them are a little easier to hit than others. And I would be surprised if they would be super happy that overwhelming, forces or whatever has
the win rate.
The win rate. Yeah, I think they would be like, this is supposed to be kind of a crazy more akin to the Cruel Ultimatum side of things. But, you know, whatever. I mean, to me, that isn't like some huge hit. And like you said, some of the really powerful, efficient stuff that pops up every once in a while, like Path to Exile, you know, ultimately in limited, Path to Exile is very powerful, very efficient, but, you know, arguably a 2-for-1 in the wrong direction. I mean, it's not completely broken or whatever, where you're just like, this isn't fun to play anymore. It's just a removal spell that's really, really, really good. And I love that. I mean, to me, I just think that the other 2, the special friends or whatever it's called, and or special guests or whatever, and then the big score ones.
Big score.
Yeah, they just feel out of place to me. You know, we were talking about it at the PT, and you know, I was in the booth with Monty, and he asked me about a card, and I'm like, I can't remember which one that is, and it was some card off the big score sheet, and I'm like, right, I read over these, but like even with the amount of drafting I did before the PT, which was like a decent amount, I hadn't even played with her against that card. I think I'd probably played with her against effectively all the cards on the breaking news sheet at that point. Like you see them all the time, so you know your checklist goes pretty quickly. But you know, the big score cards, those are like roughly 1 in 8 packs. Same with the special guests or whatever it's called. And you know, those ones I felt like just were adding another layer of weird complexity without like a big payoff.
Yeah. I mean, those like I literally did not even know that the special friends cards existed when I was doing like my set review. They're like, what about they were like, what about Brazen Borrower? I'm like, what? There's
totally
Brazen Borrower. It's a good card.
I didn't even know that was it.
Yeah.
So I don't even know what the purpose of those cards were. Like, I understand what happened with the big score. I think they were just squeezing in kind of something that was meant to be like a bonus thing, and they brought it in or something like that. But I don't think that that's something that they're going to do moving forward. I would guess that what they're likely going to do is have your base set plus the bonus sheet, which I do think adds to the drafting experience. So I would love it if they kept that, but I would also love it if they just didn't add, 30 mythic rares like that have a different naming convention in. Well, and
let's just say, everything in moderation is not something Wizards has been recently into. Like, some amount of all of this is fine. Just like even like some amount of extra rares in the packs is fine. Packs frequently having 2 to 4 rares every single time, having multiple where it's like, oh, there's only one rare in this pack. Wow.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Too much. Bonus sheet, totally great. We like the bonus sheets. We've been on record talking about that. 3 different bonus sheets of like wildly different rarities, wildly different cards. Like, no, that's not great.
Right.
It's just like, oh, more Magic sets? Yeah, that's pretty cool. Oh, 17 more a year? No, that's not. It's
right.
As always, like if you just kind of, moderate things a bit, I think that a lot of people will like it, but they've got different goals than we do.
Yeah. I mean, look, I totally understand the perspective of somebody who's not drafting and just open a pack and you open 4 rares and you're like, oh my gosh, that's awesome, right?
Right.
So I'm assuming that that's part of how that was part of the equation. It's like that's something that's delightful to people instead of, I'm drafting and I opened, or I'm playing in a sealed deck and four of my opponent's packs had 4 rares in them. It's just like I didn't have a chance.
Right. And this just might be a casualty of them trying to kind of, make this play booster do everything, or
right.
And I get it. Like I'm not really that mad about it. It did just feel like very inelegant to have the extra 2 bonus sheets, and also thematically, you could kind of pick up what they were putting down with the breaking news sheet. I mean, they made it visually look like it was supposed to be an Old West newspaper, or whatever. But like they kind of went a little. I mean, this is an aside for us, but I mean, they did go too hard at that. Like it actually looked like a washed out newspaper with no color on it. And that meant that you couldn't even really tell, what colors the cards were at a glance. And so that was a little bit weird. I mean, maybe they leaned into it too hard there, but the cards, they made sense as a collection of cards. There was some big, splashy, expensive, cool stuff to go for. There was some throwback stuff that was really good. There was a few cards in there, that you wouldn't care about at all for limited. Fine, no problem. You just skip over them. It's 1 card in the pack, no big deal. Similar to mythic rares or whatever. There's always going to be a few that just aren't really playable and limited, and that's totally fine. But then when you go to the next ones, it was like very... I think most of the big score ones had to do with artifacts or something like that. And they kept referencing things that just didn't really fit. You could also feel some of the cards that they picked on the breaking news sheet. You knew why. Like you could say, oh, they recognize that this would be really good in this deck. Hypothesis coming in there. Buried in the Garden comes up a bunch too for the kind of rampy, go big, multicolored type deck. Like Buried in the Garden's awesome for that, right? And they didn't want to just straight up reprint it or print it in the set again. So they're like, hey, we'll put it on the bonus sheet. It'll come up every once in a while. Perfect, right? Like these things, you can see the through line for like why they did that. But on the other ones, it's like, what is this doing here? Like this is supposed to be some treasure that they found at the junction or something, but it just didn't really add up for me.
It's a really bizarre collection of mythic rares too, right? Like I think the blue ones are all completely unplayable in limited.
Mm-hmm.
And then white just has the best rare in the set in that collector's cage. And then green has the Vaultborn Tyrant. And then red is also completely unplayable. So it's just, I don't exactly know kind of what went on there because I just wasn't involved with any of that stuff.
Well, we don't believe that, but okay.
But it is just very odd, just a collection of cards, because there's just no balance with regards to the power level between the colors. There's just there's not one good blue card that you would like to open, right? Unless you want your artifact for your artifact deck in Modern or whatever. Yeah. So and it just kind of being added, and then also just the collation. Like, why does this just pop up randomly on top of 2 extra rares that you can open in the pack? Just leads to just some pretty ridiculous pack sometimes, which does affect, of course, the limited environment.
Yeah.
So moving on from us complaining about this ridiculousness, no, it is fun. I had a question that I meant to ask earlier that I kind of didn't get to. How often are you splashing a color when you're playing like I would imagine like white green probably splashes a lot less than black green, for example, but like how often are you splashing a color in the set?
So this is one thing. Oh my gosh. It puts me on tilt even thinking about this.
Nice.
So I lean towards being very consistent with my mana base, and from what I can tell, my opponents do not care at all. It's completely absurd how badly people build their mana bases. Like you do realize you need to be able to cast your spells. You can't just put 5 of each basic in your land and hope it works.
Well,
and
they can cast it against you
all the time. I don't understand. People just have no idea. Like, I even see it in my Discord. People just post like, hey, check out my deck. What do you think? I'm like, cut all your white cards and cut the 4 planes you're trying to play instead of 5 forests.
Damn, Paul just
3
tearing into the people on his Discord.
Wow.
Look, I'm just saying this is what everybody does and my opponents do as well. It's like, don't get super greedy, particularly if you're not green, right? If you're green, you can have Outcast or Greenblade, Spinewoods, Armadillo, Dance of the Tumbleweeds, Hard Bristle Bandit, whatever. You can have ways to splash. But if I'm not green, I really avoid splashing because deserts are just so highly contested. You just have to kind of get lucky and hope that you get a desert that's on color, right, to help you with your splash. And if you don't, then you're just in a lot of trouble. Like, you need to pick up like 2 deserts, maybe a conduit pylons to try to splash. And even if I do, I'm going to be splashing maybe 1, maybe 2 cards. I really just don't. And then I go up against a person who's just like every color but green, but 4 colors. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, how are you casting your spells? So I feel like that's probably also what's led me to have a much higher win rate, because I just try to be reasonable with my mana base. Whereas if I lose to that person who drew their perfect mana, they're going to lose 2 other games where they're just holding those cards in their hand. So I just think,
Paul, you might play against someone who goes plains, swamp, forest, and just casts double colored each spell. They just got unlucky and didn't draw the 7 deserts of the Obzon colors that they had. You just didn't see that. They actually had perfect mana.
And I do that. I say that all the time in my videos. I'm like, I just assume their mana works. I just assume they have
sounds like
4
it's working against
deserts. I'm going to stop questioning. Oh, wow. There's a rooftop assassin, a thunder salvo, and like a double blue counterspell in their deck. And they're like splashing irascible Wolverines. I just don't know what's going on. So I just assume that their mana works because I have given up on trying to make sense of what my opponents are trying to do with their mana. But for me, if I'm not green, I try to avoid being 3 colors unless the deserts kind of break my way. So if I have a close pick between something on my color and something that's a little more powerful on the splash, I'll just take the card in my color unless I'm green.
I think that people are often surprised about that when they watch Luis's stuff, that like, he'll just make a basic consideration like, well, I've got this, 4-drop and it has, 2 white. It's like 2 white for this thing, but I'm base red, even though I am red-white, and he'll say, maybe I'll cut that, and people are like, what? Like, that's a good card. You can't cut that, and he's like, look, my mana's not so great. Like, I don't have like 5 dual lands in this deck or whatever. And, I'm going to make a disciplined concession here and try to make sure that my mana goes as smoothly as possible. And people, I've seen him in the chat, in the comments and stuff, are just like, what? Like, but that's a good card. You can't cut it from your red-white deck or whatever. And, that discipline I see from both of you guys, being very aware, not just of splashes, those ones stand out a lot, but even of cards within your color pair. And am I going to play this because I need it on, it's 1 white and I need it on turn 3 and I'm not really going to be able to do that. You guys are more apt to just cut that card and try to protect your mana situation above all else. And I think that's not the norm, based on what you're saying, Paul.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I do want to call out. It's just like anything that costs 2 mana of a single color is just way, way worse. Not even like a little bit worse. It's way, way worse. It's crazy. You should never want to play a 3-drop that's like 1 white or one. A great example of this is Kervek. Right? It's 1 black for a 3/3, and it has a really cool ability. When you commit a crime, you get to play a black spell from your graveyard, pay 2 life, right? That seems like a really awesome card. It gives you a ton of value if you can ever, set it up. Costs 1 black. You're just not going to play this on turn 3 very often. You know what I mean? And part of the value of this card is just it's a 3-mana 3/3, right? So it's like something you can play on curve, and oftentimes it's just going to sit in your hand, right? So just cards like another great example of this is Archangel of Tides, obviously.
Yep.
Everybody's just going to look at that card. It's got, I would bet that it has like, it gets taken in the top 3 picks of every draft. I just feel like people take it super highly, right?
Right.
And I bet it's going to perform far worse than that because people are just going to take a bunch of murders and consuming ashes and then go like, 9 swamps, 8 plains and just hope things works out. And that's just not how you're supposed to build your deck. So Archangel of Tides is something, if you take it, you need to make sure that you have the mana, you're going to have the mana to cast it, or else you're going to have to treat it like it's a 5 or 6 drop, which is still fine. But you just have to make sure when you take cards like that, you need to make sure that your mana is rock solid. So especially when it comes to creatures, those are things you have to put extra consideration into. And I'm glad that they have really, the designers have kind of stayed away from that in general, right? Like you're not seeing, 1 black 2/2 flyer or whatever.
They're well aware what it means to be a double colored card at this point. And the point I always make on the show is like 9/8 is actually just not a good mana base. Like
right.
This comes up a lot in the context of Cube, which is why I'm talking, where we talk about how like when you're blue, red and Cube, you still need to like go out of your way to take fetches and Volcanic Island type cards. Cause in limited, you have to play 9/8 most of the time, right? Like 90% of the time over you look at your last 1,000 limited decks, every format, you're pretty close to 9/8 as like the mean or whatever. But if you were playing a Dimir deck and you have your mana base is like 7/8 with 2 blue-black deserts, like that's actually really good. That's way better because in constructed, like the equivalent if you were like a 40-card constructed deck is like you probably have like something like half dual land. So you're just like, instead of 17 sources, you're at like 20, 25, 28 sources because a 9/8 mana base just isn't, you're going to draw 3 islands and 0 swamps, like some percentage of the time. That's pretty high. So yeah, a double colored card is just like a massive beating.
It's interesting, Paul, taking a look at the numbers on what you were just describing for Archangel of Tides as your example backs up what you're saying in a pretty incredible way. The games in hand win rate for it is 55.5%. So that's barely above break even. Yeah. So that's a mediocre card. And remember, that's games in hand, right? So that's the times when you draw it, not when you cast it or when it resolves or whatever, right? So that's you're filtering for that on some level. It's Elsa. That's its average last seen at. So that's the average last time that you see it in a pack is 2. Meaning that it's either getting first or second picked like all the time.
Can I complain about this card more for a second, if you don't mind?
No.
It's also less good than you think because it only works when it's untapped for defense or tapped when attacking. Like it's just such a beating how bad this card actually is.
Totally.
Yeah. People just see all the words in a 4-mana 3/5 flyer and they're like, it's great. I'm just like, you're just not casting it turn 4 in like 80% of your games, right? It's just going to sit in your hand. There are going to be games where you just don't cast it at all, right? So it's definitely a card you just shouldn't take very highly unless it's like you're going to play maybe like a 11/6 mana base. And even then, you're not going to play a turn 4 all the time. It's just, just don't take it that highly.
And to compare it to another extremely difficult to cast card, but it really does illustrate how hard like white can be, or, how hard it can be, is Cruel Ultimatum. So the win rate on Cruel is 60.7% games in hand win rate. Now, we're of course assuming that most of the people that take Cruel and put it into their deck are also building around it to some extent, but its Elsa is 4.67. Like it almost goes 5th pick on average, right? And, and Archangel has a significantly, like that's a big difference, 5%, 6% in that range, takes it from shrug playable maybe, to decent card. 60% is like, that's a winner. That's a card you want in your deck. And this thing is going almost 3 picks later on average, than Archangel. So it's really interesting to compare those to see, kind of where people value these cards at in the booster draft versus how well they're actually doing for them when they put them in their deck and they draw them. And I would love to see like a graph between what has the biggest correlation, the biggest delta between how highly people pick it and how low its win rate is. But my guess is Archangel of Tides is going to be on the short list for that. And the reason is simple. It's the mana. It's exactly what Paul was saying. It's because people put it in their deck thinking, oh, I'm going to be white, and they can't cast the dang thing.
Yeah, I would guess it's the Angel. Well, actually, my guess is going to be Jace.
Okay.
I bet people first pick Jace all the time because it's a planeswalker. So I just bet that like people take it way higher than it actually performs, and it costs blue.
This is Jace Reawakened.
I believe, yeah. I believe
so
that.
Jace Reawakened has the exact same alpha as Archangel. Yeah. So it's 2.02 versus 2.01. So exactly the same. People either first or second pick it, and its win rate is 50.6%. So you might have a winner there, Paul, because that is
that's
dismal.
The thing that's brutal right now is like in the past, I would have been like, wow, that win rate is Cheon's, but like demonstrably his win rate is much higher than that. So like I can't really go to that.
I was going to say we could put his win rate
Isn't
up.
this the new Cheon's? Like I've been pretty consistent with this, Luis, for a few months.
Oh man. Yeah, I'm looking.
Well,
I'm
waiting
looking
for
at
the follow-up.
I'm looking at the top. The one that I see that the one that jumps out as because most of the top cards, as you might imagine, have high win rates, right? Railway Brawler, Gisa, Bristly Bill, these type of cards are all in the mid and sometimes low to mid 60s, depending. The one that jumps out just scanning through the list kind of quickly is Sword of Wealth and Power, which has an ALSA of 1.48, which is where you would expect like a traditional sword to go because it's colorless and people think, well, I'll just put it on any deck or whatever. But its win rate is 52.3%. Like that's really low for a card that barely makes it to second pick. Like people are either first picking it the majority of the time, and then the rest of the time they're second picking it. And the card only has 52% win rate. Like that's below average. Like that card actually is losing you games for having it in there. So that really stands out as one as well. But yeah, maybe we'll talk to Circo and he can put together a list of some of the cards that get picked the highest but perform the worst, and see what those are. One more question for you, Paul, before we call it a show. Have there been any cards or types of cards or anything like that you feel are overrated, underrated, or maybe just in comparison to your style are overrated or underrated?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, maybe it's not really a secret anymore, but like one card that I've was pretty high on kind of fairly early in the format is Bucolic Ranch. So this is the desert that allows you to cast mounts. But for 3 mana, you can look at the top of your library, and if it's a mount, you can reveal it and put it into your hand, or you can put it on the bottom. So effectively, you can use this as a scry land. So this card, I mean, like I said before, with the nature of this format and how there are just instances where you don't have as much to do with your mana, I've even played this in my Golgari decks as a scry land, right? Like if you're playing a deck with, particularly if you have a few Hard Bristle Bandits in your deck, right? Then all of a sudden you have all this extra mana lying around, and you have this one desert that you can often search with Dance of the Tumbleweeds and with Outcast or Greenblade. You just have green cards that allow you to search for deserts. So having exactly one copy of this just goes a long way to help you grind kind of in the late game. I think it's phenomenal in green-white. I think you should prioritize this pretty highly. You should take it pretty highly in your green-white decks. But even in my Abzan decks, if my mana is good enough, I will play this as a one-of, just because I think it's pretty valuable to get that scry effect. And if you're playing a green deck, even if you're not green-white, you're still probably going to have like 3 mounts in your deck that you can hit.
Okay. Yeah. Those type of cards, it's interesting because the mount specific cards have mostly missed in terms of like build around or anything. But some cards just say like, if it's a mount, and you can be like, all right. And you just sort of get something free for it. That's also a fine way to implement a mechanic that you just sort of feel like you get a bonus here and there, but without having to really try for it. Right.
Yeah. Another card that I think is like amazing that I think I still see like 4th pick, or 5th pick that I just shouldn't, is Getaway Glamour. And I think people just
this card.
Yeah, people just look at this card and just think it's worse than like another like premium like removal spell, and it's just better in a lot of instances. This card is amazing. It is a 4 mana. I mean, for 4 mana, you can get something out of the way and kill their biggest creature. If you have the biggest creature, obviously you can flicker your creature and still kill their biggest creature. But not only that, I mean, you can also use this as a way to save your creature, right? I mean, this is just such a flexible card that it just leads to so many blowouts. I've gotten so many 2-for-1s with this card where my opponent just goes, kill your thing. And I'm like, blink it, kill your big thing. Or they're like, stop cold on your creature. All right, I'll blink my thing and I'll kill your thing. Or I'll blink my patient naturalist, kill your thing. There's just so many instances where you can get a 2-for-1 out of this card that you just don't pass this. Take this over Mystical Tether.
I mean, this card I think is better than if it was 2 and a white, destroy target creature instant. Like it's better than that.
Definitely.
It for 2 and a white kills the biggest creature in most cases, that the creature you actually want to kill, but it has all that additional flexibility that Paul's talking about here.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about cards like the Overrun and stuff that are really geared towards being ahead and they underperform or do nothing when you're behind. But this card like free rolls you the sort of game winning equity of being really good when you're ahead, because you could just get rid of 2 of their creatures often for a turn and just kill them. Right. And but you still get something usable out of it when you're not in that situation. And that's the key, is that cards that are great at pressing your advantage or sealing a victory are really powerful and they're great to have. You just don't want to have things that only do that, because, this is why quadrant theory exists. If you're in one of the other 3 quadrants, they don't do anything, and you're going to find yourself in those way too often to make it worth it. But this one just lets you have that for free, and then you get to do powerful other stuff when you're not in that situation. And it's yeah, this card is the type of card that when somebody casts it, you're like, dang, it does that. My card's gone and you just saved your guy, or I just lost my 2 creatures for the turn and now you're hitting me for 9 and I'm going to go to 2 and you're going to have 4 creatures or whatever. This is the type of, or I'm just dead on the spot. Yeah, I like that call, Paul. That card's been really good too.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many good come into play creatures as well in this format, right? Like imagine blinking a Vault Plunder and killing their thing, right? Just there's just, or blinking your Honest Rutstein or your Ambush Gigapede, where I just think this card is awesome. And that's another card that I want to talk about, which is the Ambush Gigapede. This is a card kind of coming. I haven't called it that, but I guess maybe.
You're missing out.
Commonly known as.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyways, the Ambush Giga Chad is a card that I think initially I'm just like, well, this is kind of expensive. It's not great. I just actively want at least 1 copy of this in almost all of my decks at this point. There's just plenty of things to kill with this card, and just being able to have a way to get in front of your opposing big creatures and getting a 2-for-1 just happens a lot of the time. And on top of that, there's just a lot of great ways to recur creatures from the graveyard. So being able to recur this in the late game just gets you so much value that, and this is a card that I don't have to take highly, right? It's a 6-drop. I just see this table all the time, but it's a card that tables frequently that I'm happy to put into my deck, right? Yeah. And that's where you can get those edges where I'm like, oh, I don't need to take this Gigapede 5th pick, even though I feel like it might be a 5th pick level card, just because I'm going to get a 9th or 10th pick because, it's a 6-drop. There's only so many you can play. Also, I think some people are sleeping on this card.
Yeah. This gets to the core of something that you find when you get into any type of kind of game theory environment, whether it's an actual game or whether it's something that you're trying to game on a bigger picture, gambling or, investing or something like that, which is that once information is known, then it's not about just knowing it, right? Like at this point, all the people that Paul's playing on the upper ladder, they know the cards, they know what cards are good or not. And that's an advantage that you need to have to even step foot in the arena, as it were, right? That's part of where we come in, is to try to get you to that level of information. But once you start playing against where everybody knows that information late in a format at the high end of the ladder, if you're playing against really good players, if you're playing at the Pro Tour, that type of stuff, that's table stakes. Everybody knows what the good cards are. So where the edges start to come in are, where's the difference between what people think is a good or a bad card and where it actually plays, where I can pick it up in the draft. And the Giga Chad's a perfect example of that, where it's like, Paul's not saying, oh, this card's awesome and you need to take it early and play it and you're going to win a bunch of matches. He's saying this card actually does serve a role in the format and you can just wheel it at will. It just goes routinely in the last, few picks of the pack or whatever. And it actually, under the right circumstances, can serve a role in a deck. That's one little checkbox that Paul has of many that, we develop as higher level players, people who are trying to really get deep into a format of, it's the delta. It's the difference between how these cards are perceived and how good they actually play versus just knowing how good they are. Because once you know that, then everybody's on the same page anyway, and everybody just does the same stuff. So you can't actually get ahead of people. Okay. Go ahead, Paul.
Got it. I said, I think one other thing that has kind of maybe allowed me to be a little more successful in this format than maybe some others is, I think one of my strengths as somebody that plays is I'm pretty good at identifying the types of things that my opponent can have based on the mana that they have available. It's always a puzzle, right? And I guess maybe this is because I'm a control player at heart, so I'm always kind of playing that game, right? It's like, all right, what can I counter, what have you? What can you have? There's a lot of just great instants in this format, and whenever my opponents have the mana, I do what I can to play around what they're representing. And obviously, that's just how to be a good Magic player in general, but I think that's just kind of one of the things, like maybe sequencing I'm not perfect at, or maybe doing this thing I'm not perfect at, but if there's one thing I'm pretty good at, it's just identifying what my opponents can have and based on what they've done, what they can be representing. And that's allowed me to play around a lot of things and not run into all the traps that they're representing. And I think that like there's just the gameplay is pretty deep. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of instances where you play against these control decks where they just have 5 mana up and you're like, all right, what the heck do I do? Right. And being able to navigate those games and not 2-for-1 yourself with your combat tricks or whatever is going to be a recipe for success, I think, more in this format than some of the others I've played.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes up watching both your YouTube channel and also Luis's as well. Is like the number of times that you guys are surprised by a play or caught off guard by that is almost never. You're usually like, this looks like it might be this. And then you'll think about whether you have the luxury of playing around it or if you need to kind of press onward or if you're okay with the exchange. And then if you decide to do so and they have it, it's like, yeah, okay, they had it, and you guys make it look so easy and casual and stuff. Well, I know, your viewers are going like, how the heck did you call that one and that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's almost unheard of for either of you to be like, oh my God, I did not see that coming. Like I that never happens. Like, sometimes people just have like a chain of cards where it's like an unlikely sequence, that they might have. And you might go, okay, wow, that was something. But like, it's never like you're just walking into these traps and being like, skullduggery, like, how could I have possibly seen that coming?
I'm honestly more surprised when they don't have anything.
Yeah, you're like
I'm like, oh, they could have this and this and this.
Yeah, you spent all this effort to try to play around something, and they just don't have
nothing,
it.
And you're like, all right, easy game, I guess.
Yeah.
I had a kind of funny situation like that in a recent Cube game. It was, and the reason was I was playing. If I won this game, my team wins the draft. It's like a 3-on-3. This is match 9, game 3, right? The highest stakes imaginable, especially when you realize what the actual stakes were, which were also very high. And I had my opponent dead by so much, but I had to like spend a little bit of time, especially even talking to my teammates, like to make sure, because I was like committing to a thing where if they had like this right combination of things, then like, maybe I get screwed or whatever. And they didn't have it. We won the draft. But but my point was, it was kind of agonizing for the other team that I had to sit there for like 2 to 3 minutes, which if you've seen me play, that's not a usual amount of time I take to make a play, just to make sure that we were actually like, okay, we're locking it up, right? Like we got this. And it's just like, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And of course, that's when that you're going deep is when you start to come up with 2-card combinations. Well, what if they have this and this, right? And can I afford to play around that, or is it reasonable to play around that? That's where things get, pretty interesting there too. All right, let's call it a show there, boys. That was really great stuff. Paul, thanks so much for coming on. We love having you on. Maybe we should make this a regular thing where you give us the Paul update on the channel after a few weeks of the format to kind of get us up to speed with where you're at on it. Because I mean, if you keep doing these Road to Rank 1, you're just playing so much, and it's great to have a perspective like yours, especially from somebody who's playing at a very high level. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, not a problem. I would absolutely love to come on and share whatever insights I have with whatever limited format that I'll be playing. Even if I do poorly, I hope you guys still have me on.
Oh no, we're going to be checking that win rate and making sure.
Yeah, I was going to say there's certain
I can't come on. Sorry, Paul.
That we have about win rate, but if you meet those expectations, yeah, totally, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. I'll tell you what,
I've
Paul,
set a high bar for myself.
If you don't meet them, we'll still mention that you didn't meet them, and that's why you're not on for this cycle. That's but fair. You'll probably be on next cycle again. Where can people find you if they want to say hi or if they want to watch your stuff?
So yeah, basically all of my content at this point is on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@Paul Cheon, I believe. I might even have that wrong. I'm not sure. But yes, my YouTube is
I will have a link.
Thank you. It might be Haum for Paul Cheon, I'm not sure. But anyways, YouTube is kind of where I make the vast majority of my content. I post daily limited videos, and basically that's just all I'm going to be doing. In the beginning, I was trying to find where I need to be, but this is it. This is my home. Current set limited Magic. If you need help and you want to watch and you want to improve your game at limited, that's where you need to go.
And yes, it is at Haumphing for your YouTube channel, though the title of it is Paul Cheon. So if they search for that, they will find it.
I had it wrong. I was just directing people to just a fake page.
Yeah. And then you also started a Patreon and stuff for that, right? So you got all the stuff going over there, right?
Yeah. Patreon.com / I believe Paul Cheon. That one I'm pretty sure is correct.
That is correct. Yes.
Great. Yeah. And so access to that will then give you access to the Discord. And it's actually been kind of amazing how it's just kind of grown. I was like, wasn't sure if I wanted to have a Discord, and then I did it, and now it's just like the best thing ever, where basically it's just a community, and I don't even have to do anything sometimes, although I'm very active, but I'll just wake up and there's just like these walls of just like, what should I have picked? Here's my draft log. Take a look at my trophy. What would you cut? How do I do this? How to do that? And everybody's just been so super helpful. So I want to give a shout out to all the people there. They have been absolutely incredible. And
people can get into that by being a patron of yours, or?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. I'll put a link to that as well in the show notes. Thanks again, Paul, for coming on. We really do appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. For us, if you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV pretty much everywhere. If you want to visit our Patreon, it's patreon.com/limited resources. And of course, our sponsor is Ultimate Guard. Make sure you check out ultimateguard.com. And once you find what you want there, you can go to your favorite online retailer or your favorite local game store to find the Ultimate Guard products of your dreams. We thank them for their sponsorship of the show. If you want to find everything related to the show, it's lrcast.com, including every episode we've ever recorded and links to like Luis's YouTube channel and that kind of stuff right on the front page as well. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
All right. So I made a pretty big decision this last week. I cut initiative from my cube for the cube that we draft with online.
Hallelujah.
Yes.
And I got to give credit to BK. He Andrew Beckstrom. He lobbied for it hard. We were like, okay, I'll try making a list without it. We'll see how this plays. And as it turns out, like, it is just so much better to play without it. Like, it's
unsurprisingly.
Yeah, it's
I
wild
hated
how
initiative.
Dude, when you put White Plume Adventurer back in, I was just like, what are you guys doing?
Well, it worked out really nicely to take it out. Like, it, after playing a bunch of games, it was like so much more fun not having it. And I gotta, like I said, I just gotta say that it was a lot. I wish I had not played it to begin with, but after a lot of testing on both sides, the games are more fun. Like that's pretty much what it comes down to. Is it the
complication or the power level? What is it?
I think for me, it's that initiative does a couple things. One, it's complicated, but that actually
like everybody knows what it does now, right?
That doesn't matter too much for our online group. We've cubed so much, everyone knows what it does. For me, it's that when someone's behind, initiative just drops the hammer completely, right? Like you can never win if you're behind and someone plays an initiative card. And a big part of that too is it makes control and reactive decks a little more viable. Like you end up in spots where you can actually draft, like the fan favorite blue-white Cheons, and you end up in a spot where you can play counters and removal and not just lose because they resolved a 4-mana creature. The other thing is when someone casts an initiative creature, the game's going to end probably less than 5 turns. It doesn't, not necessarily in their favor, though obviously very likely in their favor, but it's just, well, the initiative is not going away. Someone has it. There's no way to stop that from happening. And that means that someone's going to be in a losing position, usually in like a very short amount of time.
Yeah, that was such a rude awakening for me when I started cubing in the Discord. When I learned what initiative was, I just didn't even know what that was because I didn't cube for many, many years. And then I was like, oh, well, so I just can't play control ever. That's kind of what I thought at first. So then I had to radically shift like my card evaluations where I'm just like, well, I just can't draft these control decks anymore. I just need to take creatures. So I just found myself just drafting mid-range decks more often than control decks just because if the best way to compete with initiative is just to have some random flyers in play to take it back.
Hallelujah. Luis. Good job.
I'm really happy with the decision, and it's gone and it's not coming back.
Good job, BK.